Welcome back, everyone. You might be a Westerner watching this and saying, am I an idiot? Do I need an idiot's guide to Hamas? Well, let's begin by helping you figure that out. If you've seen current events in Israel and said something like, sure, Hamas is butchering innocent civilians, including children, burning people alive, beheading babies, and taking women and girls captive with the stated purpose of raping them, but then you need an idiot's guide to Hamas. If you've attempted a more abstract, sanitized version, sure, what Hamas is doing is bad stuff, but you still need an idiot's guide to Hamas. Also, if you've ignored the stated intentions and goals of Hamas in favor of your own contrived reasons for their actions, you need an idiot's guide to Hamas. If you repeat the fashionable objection about Israel's occupation without being able to demonstrate a remotely historically responsible knowledge of the region, without being able to say who is occupying what, defining who the who are or what the what is, or why who is occupying what qualifies as an occupation at all, you're an idiot, and you need an idiot's guide to Hamas. Finally, if you repeat the fashionable objection about Israel's apartheid, you have no idea of the demographics of Israel and surrounding Arab nations currently, much less in the past. That makes you an idiot who needs an idiot's guide to Hamas. Those are just some of the indications that you might be an idiot. And if you're not, watch this video anyway for suggestions on how to help other people out of idiocy, and leave your own pointers in the comments section as well, because in the West, we are surrounded by idiots. You see, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Or as I like to say, prosperity foments idiocy. And the West has been very prosperous. Now, if you're living in perilous times, your survival may depend on your wit. Being an idiot could get you killed. However, prosperous countries have a lot of momentum, and people can afford to be incredibly obtuse, and it'll be fine for a while. But things keep happening in the West that serve as frequent reminders that we are surrounded by idiots who have the luxury of denying reality in favor of whatever narrative they want to believe. Whether it's litter boxes in schools for kids who identify as cats, or yet another celebration of a man as Woman of the Year, the idiocy in the West is embarrassing. But there is, perhaps, nothing more embarrassing than Westerners being fooled by a group of terrorist cavemen called Hamas. So, idiots and non-idiots alike, let's consider some propositions together. Proposition 1, Hamas terrorists do not think like Westerners. But I should add also that they do know how Westerners think. For examples of the former, in recent days we've seen Hamas proclaim they love death. This fact alone is a sufficient contrast to Western thought, but I'll continue. We've seen them burn Israelis alive. We've seen them killing the elderly. We now know that in their recent attack, Hamas specifically targeted children. Hamas killed children in front of parents and then killed the parents. Hamas also killed parents in front of children and then killed the children or took them captive. They also tortured parents in front of children and children in front of parents. They're checking all the boxes. Hamas took women and girls with the stated intentions of raping them. Hamas paraded the dead bodies of victims around in the streets. Hamas celebrated all of this, and if you don't believe that, just watch the videos that they release. Hamas blocked escape routes for evacuees attempting to leave Gaza. Hamas uses civilians as shields by setting up their operations in hospitals, apartments, and so forth. Now, unless you're at the level of sewage in Western society, and we do have plenty of those, like the university students glorifying the violence of Hamas while at the same time whining about improper pronouns, we consider the actions of Hamas to be war crimes, not to mention incredibly, incomprehensibly depraved. I say all this just to communicate the very simple point that Hamas does not think like you. So when Westerners say, sure, Hamas is butchering innocent civilians, including children, burning people alive, beheading babies, and taking women and girls captive with the stated purpose of raping them, but whatever follows will inevitably be some attempt at Western rationalization of what's happening. Don't do that. Don't be an idiot. Hamas does not think like you. It's not that hard of a concept. Proposition 2, not all cultures are equal. I know that's a painful one, isn't it? We're Westerners. We're multicultural. We're pluralistic. We're inclusive. Citizens of the world all feel the same way. All cultures believe the same things. And coincidentally, people everywhere basically think the same things as us. We can all live together in harmony in the utopia that we create for ourselves. That's a myth. Some cultures have values that are demonstrably inferior to others. If your culture says to rape a woman, then kill her, then spit on her, then celebrate over her dead body, then common sense says your culture is inferior. Now, here's the tough part for Westerners. Such actions should be unequivocally condemned without qualification or reference to anything anyone else is doing anywhere. This may be the most difficult part of the Idiot's Guide, so here's some help. Work on repeating this sentence. I unequivocally condemn Hamas. On your first attempt, you may say something like, I don't like what Hamas is doing. Your second attempt may be something like, I condemn Hamas, but no, I unequivocally condemn Hamas. It may be helpful to actually vocalize the period at the end of the sentence. Let me illustrate. I unequivocally condemn Hamas, period. It'll take some work, but I believe that even Westerners most brainwashed into the grueling guilt trips, into the countless mea culpas, into the endless series of struggle sessions can eventually do it. Yeah, probably not. Proposition 3, if Hamas terrorists tell you why they're doing something, and they do, especially if their actions confirm it, then believe them. Because this is an idiot's guide to Hamas, we will return to the same statement yet again. Sure, Hamas is butchering innocent civilians, including children, burning people alive, beheading babies, and taking women and girls captive with the stated purpose of raping them. But Proposition 1 taught us not to finish this sentence with Western logic. Hamas doesn't think like you. Proposition 2 taught us not to add to the end of this statement because unequivocally condemning Hamas is warranted. Their values are objectively inferior. Our third proposition tells us not to finish this sentence because you don't need to. Hamas already did. Why is Hamas doing what they're doing? As I ask that question, narratives from Western politicians and media figures are filling your heads, aren't they? Do you remember when I said that Hamas terrorists know how Westerners think? Hamas knows that they can tell the world why they're doing what they're doing, and at least the Western world won't pay any attention. You see, Westerners are too wise. There can't be any religion or ideology that's fundamentally at play here. No, they know better than Hamas. So Hamas signals its intentions with its own words to the Muslim world, while knowing those words will be ignored by Westerners who think in the trendy categories of oppressor, oppression, victimhood, and guilt mentality. These are ready-made categories for Hamas. Western ideology has already put Muslims at large in the oppressed category, and countries that have become prosperous, like Israel, are inevitably the oppressors. Western idiots have set the stage for the terrorist public relations campaign, and all Hamas has to do is show up on stage and play the part. This is why Proposition 3 is so important. Hamas tells you why they are doing what they are doing. Listen to them. So why does Hamas do what they do? Well, in order to even approach that question, we have to understand the very complex situation that's arisen in the Middle East over the 20th blah, 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 blah. Now let's try that again. So why does Hamas do what they do? Muhammad established the Jews as mortal enemies. Muslims will fight them until the end. However, even then, Muslims will be so incompetent, kind of like they are now, losing every war that they've fought in since the 20th century, including losing many times to the tiny little state of Israel, that all a Jew needs to do is hide behind a tree or a rock to keep a Muslim from killing him. But miraculously, the trees and rocks will give away the Jews' hiding place so that the incompetent Muslims can come and kill them. That's right, the rocks and trees will say, "O servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, so kill him." Of course, there are many verses from the Quran I could cite you, and many hadith and other sources that inspire perpetual hatred and violence against the Jews. Instead, let's just note that this same hadith is in the Hamas Covenant of 1988. There it is, the talking rocks and trees. The same document states Allah is its target, the Prophet is its model, of course referring to Hamas. The Quran is its constitution, and jihad is its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. That's convenient because death for Hamas is also the loftiest of my wishes. The document also states Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. So if one of the founding purposes of Hamas is killing as many Jews as possible, and they repeatedly engage in terror attacks designed to kill as many Jews as possible, then maybe Westerners should consider that Hamas kills as many Jews as possible because fundamentally they desire to kill as many Jews as possible. In other words, maybe the reasons for their actions are the reasons they're actually telling you. Proposition 4, there is no Western parallel between the PLO or PA, Hamas, and the Palestinians in Gaza. Here's what some Western idiots assume using the U.S. as an analogy. The PLO or PA is something like the federal government. Hamas is analogous to the U.S. military, and the Palestinians are comparable to U.S. citizens. There are lots of ways to see the flaws with this analogy, but we'll just use one by looking at the Palestinian people. Now, here I'm referring to the Palestinians in Gaza who do not support the terrorists. Those people are in a very bad situation. They've been treated terribly by their authorities. To review, Hamas has blocked escape routes for evacuees attempting to leave Gaza. Hamas uses civilians as shields routinely by setting up their operations in hospitals and apartments. Hamas hides among civilians so that when inevitable civilian deaths result, they can blame Israel. So Israel takes precautions. They'll attempt to evacuate buildings before a missile strike by mass phone calls or texts, flyers, and so forth. Israel also uses knocker bombs before an actual strike to warn occupants that Hamas wants to die anyway. Notice that the building is unharmed. Scary for sure, and that's the intent. Hamas repeatedly puts civilians in harm's way so that when they're injured or killed, they can use them as a PR weapon against Israel. And then stupid people begin parroting the same narrative.
And that's why I condemn the IDF. Because when they strike, they know that it's more probably than not going to hit civilian targets. They know that the majority of civilians, or the majority of people that are going to be affected, are civilians.
How about some other examples? Oh yeah, the plumbing problem. So Hamas converts resources that should be used for Palestinians into terrorism. There are major plumbing and water issues in Gaza. In response, various countries have sent equipment, such as pipes. And what do pipes look like to Hamas terrorists? Well, missiles, of course, and so they got a bright idea. They even released videos of themselves converting the pipes to missiles to shoot at Israel. What happens when airstrikes destroy buildings in Gaza? Well, Hamas isn't concerned with rebuilding so much as they're concerned with taking the scrap metal and, you guessed it, making more weapons to help them obey Allah's order to kill the Jews. When Gaza infrastructure has been destroyed in Israeli airstrikes, what's left, sheet metal, pipes, and so forth, gets reworked by Hamas and emerges as rocket tubes or other explosive devices. Fortunately, the Gazans are innovative and they can dig wells for themselves, unless, of course, Hamas bans them from doing so. They could get a sentence of 6 months to a year in prison. Why do this? You know by now, hungry, thirsty, oppressed people are much better for the political image Hamas is trying to project to the West. The Palestinian people simply play that part for Hamas, who uses them to play the media, politicians, and you, if you're an idiot. So remember, Hamas terrorists don't think like Westerners, but they know how you think. Not all cultures are equal. If Hamas terrorists tell you why they're doing something, and they do, and their actions confirm it, then definitely believe them. And finally, there's no Western parallel between places like Gaza and the U.S. I hope this idiot's guide was helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments section, unless, of course, you're still an idiot. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.